Now, a federal high court sitting in Kano State on Thursday set aside the ruling of an FCT high court suspending Adams Oshiomhole as the national chairman of the ruling All Progressives Congress. The order came as the embattled APC leader fought stoutly to retain his seat, filing 4 grounds of appeal to set aside his suspension. According to Oshiomhole, the FCT High Court does not have the jurisdiction to suspend him. However, the party had said that it would obey Wednesday's order suspending its national chairman. Joining us in the studio to discuss this and many more controversies surrounding this is a journalist and political analyst, Adeniyi Kunnu. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Good to
Thank
see
you for having me. Yes. It's interesting, and I'd like Nigerians and your viewers on the international stage not to look at things in isolation. So that takes me to some couple of years back, before the exit of the predecessor of Adams Oshiomhole, that's Adeniyi Oyegun. There were lots of things that happened before he was exited. Of course, I learned he had interest in having another shot at it. It was about 80 when he left there. And many persons say, well, you've done a lot for the party, you should go. But another part of it back then was that there were interests. Some persons felt Oshiomhole is younger, vibrant, he should take over the reins. And don't also forget, they've had the Ondo elections before the elections that brought in Adams Oshiomhole.
Yes, in 2018.
Absolutely. So as of then, the likes of Akeredolu, the current governor of Ondo, was daggers drawn, but no blood anyway was shed with the party leader, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. But Adeniyi Oyegun wrote it for him, and it resulted in the victory of the current governor of Ondo State at the polls. Now, that resulted in a crack between the national chairman, the past national chairman, and the party leader, which resulted in his bye-byes. Now, we have this man coming. Some other persons were not happy 2 years ago about what happened, and they feel, okay, it's time for us to actually deal with this man. So this man's chapter of problems emanating or unfolding started November, when he was suspended, November the 2nd, obviously at his constituency in Etsako. Now, the suspension resulted in certain litigations. The litigation itself was messy. And I don't really appreciate the fact that it brought in a lot of legalese into it when you really should have addressed these issues, at the outset. So from November 10, they said they suspended him. And of course, we know that in Edo State, where the current APC party chairman comes from, the executive of that particular state party are led by the governor. Don't forget, the governor of Edo State, Governor Obaseki, has said a lot in the news regarding the influence of the national chairman and how he wouldn't accept it, even having worked with him for 8 years. So you find out that the rift is becoming too complex, but we can actually take it bit by bit.
So a lot of things
are put together, combined. So,
including the
yes,
pre-2019 the primaries.
Yes, in fact, there are 2 primaries to come. One in April, the other in July, because at the end of this year we'll be having 2 elections, both in Ondo and Ondo. Now, part of the challenge they're having is that many people say they do not want a repeat of what happened to the former governor of Lagos State, Akinme Ambode, where the party threw him away with the bathwater, saying he wouldn't get, the ticket to run a second time, and in fact, he didn't get the ticket. Now, they feel that Adams Oshiomhole will not let Akeredolu and Governor Obaseki get the ticket. Now, at the level of hearsays, allegations, and certain things in the print. So if you look at all of this, you cannot just be looking at the battles against the current chairman of the APC. You have to look at all of the other things that are happening.
But what does this really say about a party that, promised change when it comes to, ensuring and strengthening democratic institutions within the party itself and, of course, in the nation? The
change promised Nigerians is open-ended. It wasn't specified.
So we should have asked what kind of change.
Actually, I think that's where Nigerians or the electorate actually goofed. When somebody says, I promise you change, you could have change in the positive. You could have change in the negative. You could have change in neutral with a balance of weight. So you'd have change in this direction, talking about what people say, talking about the deal they've been doled, talking about the things they experience. So the change in question here, first of all, will begin with the kind of charity being dissipated on the home front, which is the APC.
Now, fast forward to this judicial
position. Yeah. Okay. Let's look at it this way. I have listened and I've read a lot regarding, the legal complexities of this. When there is an interlocutory injunction filed, such as we have, where you ask a defendant to hold on or maintain a particular position, what I am aware that the defendant can do is to file an appeal to counter or maybe endeavor a stay of execution of a particular thing. Now, the APC lawyer on the side of Adams Oshiomhole, they filed an appeal. But going to a court of coordinate, jurisdiction, as it were, that they should render null and void what another court at the Federal Capital Territory, because I heard him when he said the court in Abuja doesn't have the jurisdiction, and I'm beginning to wonder. You are the national chairman. Right. The suit was instituted at the Federal Capital Territory. You're the national chairman. Your party office is at the Federal Capital Territory. So he has to educate me differently from what he has said. So they talked about that. Then you went to Kano, less than 24 hours after the initial injunction of a court of competent jurisdiction to a court in Kano of coordinate jurisdiction. And according to what I've heard, you can't do such a thing. In fact, it's the reason why the legal team of Godwin Obaseki they've actually reported Justice Louis Alagwa to the National Judicial Council, that you cannot abuse such processes. And if you look at it, when Justice Sanchi of the Abuja High Court made position, he referred to the fact that this man had been suspended from his ward. So he brought it forth. Obviously, you don't go to court with just your mouth. You present papers, documents to prove that this has happened. So probably the Justice Sanchi in Abuja that gave the first injunction did that based on the evidence before him that, okay, since you've been suspended, you cannot continue to act. And let's also say this. You'd permit me to let us talk about it. In the history of party leadership, we've never had it this messy as we're having it now. Don't forget, Odigio Igun had his time, had his challenges, but they were able to manage the murky workers. They navigated it. If you look at Adams Oshiomhole, one of the things he said when he first of all came to office, there are certain offices you hold, you're expected to measure your utterances. He said if the president has been condoning the excesses of people, he wouldn't condone. He would not. He came out and tried to do the damage control. But I'm saying here that certain things should not be uttered by people that hold certain offices. And his office is one of those offices where you're supposed to be circumspect. And I think he has a lot of learning to do in that regard. Then secondly, we've had another novel experience in electioneering. As a party leader, an entire state lost an election because, let's say here, the former governor of Zamfara State has then said, if Adams Oshiomhole indeed could bear it, it should come to Zamfara State. That's ready to die for it. Now, if a party executive is saying to a party leader that he doesn't mind losing his life, that tells you that the rift is beyond normal. Right. Let's also go to River State, one of the messiest of electioneering, especially the APC. In the first place, as a party leader, you could not unite. We had an Amechi faction. We had a Magnosabe faction. Yes. It resulted in giving birth to a new political party led by somebody who is a current minister in the cabinet of the APC. Support another person. Nothing has ever been messier as we have it now. So I have to say here that even if we want to throw away or do not consider all of the legal issues out there, let's look at the logical presentations, emanations, controversies, disputations that have been put forth. I think Oshiomhole has a lot to do. Now, he says some people really do not want him to superintend ahead of the 2023 elections. I'm saying here that whenever something starts, everybody has a responsibility to look at the mirrors and say, these are the issues. You don't see nobody before you see yourself. Right. You see yourself first. So Oshiomhole should, first of all, hold on and not talk about the 2023 election.
Because really he has had face-offs with almost everybody, both within the National Working Committee, his deputy,
as a matter of fact,
deputy chairman, the national legal advisor of the party, who says that Oshiomhole actually usurped, and took over his job as a national
and I have to say this,
legal
as a matter
advisor.
of fact, I think that Oshiomhole should understand that no matter how vibrant somebody is, there are certain expectations even within the office. That's why you have the administrative section of offices, you have the operations, and at some point you could have overlap of responsibilities, but not an outright takeover. I have heard less the publicity secretary of the APC in this matter than I've heard from the national chairman. Because if you look at the offices held by this working committee members, of which Oshiomhole heads, as it were, you'd expect that the person who should be there to do the job should do the job. After all, you people voted for him in, an election that you had your delegates come around, so they probably knew who they were voting for. So for the national chairman, that's why I'm just referring to the allegations of usurpation of roles there. So for the national chairman to have been accused of usurping certain roles, then there needs to be a review of this responsibility. Because I have to say this, I was expecting the publicity secretary, Lanre Onilu, to be the person speaking, attending to issues, trying to make right the things that perhaps some of us who are not party members do not understand. But we've not really had that happen. And I think it's instructive, because at times when you have people occupy certain positions that appear superior to the others, they should give consideration, be sensitive to what people will say, and to the kind of vibes their actions will generate. Because
it would seem that the national chairman of the APC, Adams Oshiomhole's strengths have become his weakness, as far as
that's it. More or less like Alexander the Great not listening. History has it. I would die too. That's it.
We'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll continue this discussion.
Okay.
Do stay with us on The Morning Show.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Before we went to the break, we were speaking to journalist and political analyst Adeniyi Kunnu on the issues surrounding Adams Oshiomhole and the political crises going on there. I'd like to change direction now and talk about the different regions of Nigeria, how this crisis could affect different parts of Nigeria, specifically the southern part of the country. How do you think that will work out?
If you look at it, 2023 is a big year for the country. Because the president wouldn't have a stake any longer. He's used 2 terms. He goes back to Dara and continues on his farm. If you check it, before this time, many persons have said a political colossus in the south, particularly from the southwest, is interested. It's been very quiet on major issues in recent times. But if we check the antecedents of politicking and alliances, especially with the political hegemony from the north, but for death, I do not think the likes of Goodluck Ebele Jonathan would have had a go at the presidency. It tells you that when you talk about political strategy, you could say the North is not educated. That is unfounded. As a matter of fact, if you're talking about literacy in the Arabic language, one of the oldest languages in the world, the North has had that encounter with such literacy as far back as the 10th century. Education in terms of Western knowledge came here in the 18th century. So the North has had strategy. And for many people who do not even understand, Arabic has innate philosophy. Arabic has innate mathematics. It has physics and astrology.
And science.
And science, basically. So I'm saying, I just digress to that for you to understand that. Do not say the North is not educated. You could say the North doesn't have that kind of inclination towards Western education. But the North is...
But even that's unfounded. I mean, we spoke with a guest that said, the Malams on the road have the transistor radios.
So let me even tell you, it's the North. Only in January of this year, particularly the Bayero University in Kano translated 9 textbooks into Hausa language. How many of the other regions have done that?
So you say all of that to...
I'm just telling you that there are lots of things that the South must learn. If you check this crisis, it is about a Southerner at daggers drawn with another Southerner, both former governors, one national chairman, the other a current minister in this cabinet. It is also an issue affecting two current southern governors. So if you're talking about the South, that complains oftentimes about wanting such niches carved at the national level in terms of political representation,
right,
it has not demonstrated that it has the capacity to hold their own. How many Northerners have you heard on the news at the moment speak on issues affecting the party? Oshiomhole has been speaking. The last time, even some of the comments were made by Southerners. The people from the North who spoke on the condition of anonymity. It tells you that there's a whole lot that the South must learn if at all it wants to restake its claim on the political platform that is called Nigeria.
In other words, you're saying there's dignity in a calculated silence.
There is dignity in being circumspect. There is also, it's also advantageous to know when to fire, to know when to speak. So for me, I think many people in the South who claim to be very educated need to learn strategy, especially the peculiar political strategy that is domiciled in the most populous black nation in the world called Nigeria.
Now, in the midst of all of this crisis within the APC, Adams Oshiomhole has this meeting with the president. Before that, there was a meeting between the governors and the president, the progressive governors, including Fayemi, Bagudu, and the rest of them. And coming out of that meeting, that's talking about Oshiomhole with the president, he seems to have come out a little more confident, saying that he is the chairman of the party. Do you think that meeting may have...
Let me say this. I have to first of all refer to some of the very heavyweight decisions that has been made or reached by INEC with respect to the elections of 2019. It was bold of them to have actually reached a decision for the Zamfara case, also their position in Rivers. I have to say that Oshiomhole must try as much as possible not to jeopardize the dreams or the aspirations of the political party. Let me tell you...
Could this be the beginning of the end for the APC? Because many have said after Buhari, APC may no longer really truly exist, après deluge.
Was it not after
Après le deluge.
C'est bon.
We know we have Yoruba on this show, now we have French.
So what I'm saying is, if you check the PDP, the demise of the PDP began when they felt that Obasanjo, former president, had outlived his importance to the party. I want to say here for the records that perhaps the end of the APC may be near based on these factions and fractions and fragments that is just looking at us in the eyes. And let me say this. One would have expected that the president demonstrates the capacity to actually pull his weight in reining them in. But the president also has a lot on his tables that he cannot even chew. Insecurity problems. The economy got downgraded in terms of the performance that it is expected to peak to about 2% by the World Bank. And at the same time, they've been telling him you have to relieve the service chiefs of their responsibilities. The president is also trying not to let anything affect his health. We know what that is. So there are lots of things that the president himself is dealing with. Don't forget, Abba Kyari is giving some people sleepless nights.
Who's been described as the de facto
president. Some people are having coffee over that issue. So the president may not be able to do so much now because his responsibility is more to Nigeria and Nigerians than to his political party. That's for the record. So if you look at Oshiomhole at this moment, I think the party needs to do a lot of consideration. There's going to be a meeting. It's going to happen next week. For me, you have to weigh the advantages and disadvantages. Don't forget, it's 2 years. They should have called one of the regular sessions. Congress. It's over 2 years they've not done that. And don't forget that they've cited a portion of the party's constitution that allows them to do that if this continues. As Oshiomhole is a daggers drawn with a lot of people, apart from people who perhaps are current ministers or governors who want second-term tickets. It's also dealing with a segment of the National Working Committee that perhaps feel that he has overreached himself. And if you look at it, Oshiomhole must just, I keep saying it there, if there's any problem or challenge any individual has, you stand in front of the mirror first. How did I allow this to happen? because we oftentimes want to look at the next man as a reason for the challenge. Whatever challenge we have as individuals, it may be as a result of acts of commission or omission. You might not know, but you allowed such thing to happen.
Like Michael Jackson said, the man in the mirror.
Oh, absolutely. You got that right. And I hope he looked at himself before he left Earth, basically. So talking about Oshiomhole, really, it's going to be really tough for him at this point. And as I said when I started this analysis, we have to look at the jeopardy, impending jeopardy to the party if certain injunctions are not followed. Let me tell you this. We're analyzing on the one hand, when the court takes a decision, they will deal with those matters away from all of the argumentative issues that were, because the court has its own dictates.
Yeah.
So we have heard from people away from if they could go to court is the fact that, do you take such matter? Do you entertain such matter? So we're expecting to hear the injunctions from the court. We're expecting to hear somebody gets dealt with for contempt of court. We expect to see what the National Judicial Commission, because the NJC must respond to what has been filed by the Gordon Obaseki team regarding what Justice Louis Alagwa did at the Kano Court. Then we have to also, we expect to hear what Justice Semchi has to say regarding giving an injunction that was not respected. And don't forget, if this APC goes ahead to conduct a party primary without somebody that is supposed to be substantive or somebody who is on suspension, then you open a can of grenades for the opposition party to use on you, and you burn yourself in the fire that you created.
Well, just quickly before we end our segment, which seems sort of like zipped by, if you were in the position, how would you order Oshiomole's political footsteps in a way that would not blow back onto the rest of the party? Because ultimately, this is a huge mess that is only going to affect how the party itself is marketed out to the electorate. So if you were in charge of his political footsteps, what do you think his next steps should be?
In the first place, it doesn't hurt the party that Oshiomhole holds on until we hear the verdicts from the court. The party has not been disbanded. The APC is still in existence. And the Constitution also makes rules for people to act in Oshiomhole's stead should any crisis arise. Right. So that simply means provisions have been made for this problem to be stemmed. So for me, I feel if I were in their midst, I have to speak to Oshiomhole and say, at the moment, you have nothing to lose. Right. Your salary won't stop. The perks of office won't be stopped. It is just that you don't be the face of the party for a period of time. So why don't you step aside and let us
Kunnu, Adeniyi Kunnu, we thank you so much for your time, journalist and political analyst Adeniyi Kunnu. Thank you very much for your time with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much.